Hello, and welcome to Spokane County Spotlight. I'm Commissioner Josh Kerns, and my guest today is Michael Baumgartner, the Treasurer of Spokane County. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Commissioner. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Now, I know most of our viewers at home are going to be familiar with you from your extensive time in the state Senate, but for those that are maybe new to the area, could you give our viewers a little bit of background about yourself, what led to your time in the state Senate prior to that, and then also how that prepared you for your current position as County Treasurer?
Well, sure, I'd be happy to do that. Well, I'm a son of Eastern Washington, born down the road in Pullman, son of two great educators. Mom was nearly 40 years a public kindergarten teacher, and my dad was a professor at Washington State University. I spent a little bit of time here at Gonzaga Prep in Spokane for high school, and then went to WSU for my undergraduate, where I studied economics and math, and then went to Harvard for my master's degree, and then headed off to the Middle East. So before joining the state Senate about 9 years ago, I spent some time in Iraq and Afghanistan with the U.S. State Department. Was in Baghdad for the Iraq surge, doing some counterinsurgency operations in the political and economic realm, and then met my wife, of all things, on a counter-narcotics team in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, where I was a contractor to a state-run program. So I always say, if Baumgartner can find love in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, all things are possible, so keep hope alive. And now we have 4 little kids growing up here in Spokane, and are just delighted to be in this new role as Treasurer of Spokane County.
All right. Now, with your time over in Iraq, where you were serving as an economic officer for the State Department, how did that prepare you for when you made that initial run for the state Senate?
Well, you know, I've been privileged to have been both in the private sector and in the public sector, and really blessed to do a number of things. I've enjoyed the things I've done most where I felt like I'm part of a team that's bigger than myself. I felt that between WSU and Harvard when I spent a year doing volunteer work with the Jesuits in Africa, and then really felt that when I left my private sector job to go to Iraq, and it was just fun to be part of a big team. And I very much feel that in public service here, both in the state Senate and the treasurer's role. Specifically to the role of a treasurer, when you're doing counterinsurgency, one of the things that you're really trying to do in what America's form of counterinsurgency was called population-centric counterinsurgency, is you're trying to build the legitimacy and effectiveness of the host nation government so that the people decide not to support the bad guys and instead support the government. So it really is a good government operation. And if you think about what is kind of the epitome of good government, is nobody likes paying taxes, but if people feel a sense of legitimacy and fairness when they're going to that part to fund their government, it really is kind of the crux of the end piece of a counterinsurgency operation in many ways. So actually, tax collection and how government spends money is one of the things we look at when we're doing counterinsurgency. So when I started my new job down at the courthouse with the team, I just told them they were all good counterinsurgents. They just didn't know it yet. So, but yeah, it's been a good transition, a good background.
All right. So you know, right now in January, the legislative session is in session right now. When you look back at your time in the state Senate, what are some of those moments that stand out as sort of your most memorable moments or experiences in the state Senate?
Well, it was really a privilege to be a state senator from here in Spokane. You know, of the 8 years I was there, I went in and we were in the minority in the Senate, and then we brought together a bipartisan coalition and actually took the majority. So I was in the majority for 6 of the 8 years I was there, and it's a lot more fun when you're in the majority. So I was previously the vice chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, helping write the state budget, and then spent several years as the chairman of the Commerce and Labor Committee, where we're dealing with large business issues and also issues on alcohol, tobacco, and other things. So it was fun to be a committee chair. You know, I really felt that I fought hard for our area, and we did that in a bipartisan fashion. So it was fun to be able to reach across the aisle and do things for Spokane. And probably my favorite year was 2015. That was the year that I helped lead the charge on the new WSU Medical School. And then we also, by extension, through that process, got a new expanded UW Medical School here as well, too. That's also the year that we got full funding for the long-awaited North-South Freeway. And then a project that was very dear to my heart was reducing the cost of of college tuition. So the first time in American history, we reduced the cost of college tuition 20%, and then also did some good things for Mount Spokane, Eastern Washington University. So that was a great year and some of my fond memories. I tell you, what I don't miss is all the hot dogs I ate at Love's gas station in Ellensburg, driving back and forth across the mountains twice a week for 8 years. So, I do miss the Senate, but I don't miss the commute.
All right. I can sympathize with you being a staffer over there for 6 years. The drive is not fun at all, and you're spot on. It's not fun working in the minority.
Yeah,
in the ledge, that's for sure.
One of the nice things about my office now is actually my deputy treasurer is Mike Voles, who is dual-hatted. He's an outstanding deputy treasurer, full-time around the year, and then this time of year, he's also the state representative for the 6th Legislative District, and Mike does an outstanding job, and it really is a benefit to my office, to the people of Spokane, because, as you know well, really the county government is the implementing arm of a lot of happens with the state, so having Mike be able to bridge that really, really helps a lot. So in terms of talking to Representative Voles and my former colleagues in the Senate, I still stay fairly active in terms of what's going on in Olympia.
Okay, fantastic. Are there any specific things about your time in the Senate that you think prepared you to be a successful treasurer, which you've been in this first year in office?
Well, I really think that time on the Ways and Means Committee, building the state budget, when you go to government, the great thing about state government, and there certainly are challenges at state government, but unlike the federal government, state government can't print money. And so you can't just boot decisions down, further down the road, kick the can further down the road. You do actually have to write a budget that balances. And when we were in the Senate, while we controlled, Republicans at that time were in the majority, we had Democrats in control in the House and Democratic governor. So it really did force you to prioritize, force you to negotiate, but force you to compromise on things. And I think that was a good process to go through. And having seen that at the state level, and now it can help bring that to the county level. While I don't write budgets as the county treasurer, I do think that background and thinking about how government implements and works is beneficial to my service here.
Okay. There's a lot of folks in the community that, when they come to the individual offices at the county, they would ask the question, what does this office do? So what are the main functions of the treasurer's office?
Sure. Well, at the treasurer's office, I like to say that we collect, safeguard, and invest your public funds. So on the collection piece, my joke is always that every little boy growing up in church dreams of being a tax collector someday. But so we do process your taxes. Now, we don't set your tax rates at the treasurer's office. That's done either by the commissioners, by the legislature, or by the people themselves when they pass an initiative. But we do collect those taxes. In fact, just yesterday, we were told by the by the county assessor what is the tax bill that we are to collect this year, and what is the apportionment of that tax bill. So we're getting those tax statements ready. So that's the tax piece, or the collect piece. The safeguard piece is we are the banker for over 80 public entities in Spokane County. So everything from the school districts to the airport to Spokane Transit, we serve as their banker. So we process about $15 billion every year in and out of our office in cash management. And so that's really a big deal being the banker. And so we got to make sure that we know where all your pennies are going for the public. And then the final piece that I spend a lot of my personal time on is the invest piece. So collect, safeguard, invest. So I run through the treasurer's office about a $1.4 billion public investment fund. And our public investment fund takes all that money that is going to eventually go out to school districts to pay teacher salaries or to bond to build additions to the new airport. And we take that money and we invest in fixed income securities, so debt instruments like U.S. Treasury bonds or farm credit bonds, and we manage that cash to get a little extra money for the taxpayers. Not a lot of people know this, but after taxes and fees, the single greatest source of revenue for the public in our area is actually the money that I manage through the treasurer's office. So this year, we will have paid out about $29 million to local public schools and other public entities, and that's $29 million less that the public would have to save on their taxes. So the part of the job that I spend most of my time on is kind of the investment banking aspect of the job, which is really enjoyable.
Okay. Well, I mean, from a financial standpoint, I mean, that it seems the work you do there is extremely crucial for the sort of the economic function sort of the taxpayers' money. Could you maybe dive into some of the other kind of programs, sort of assistance programs? I know there's kind of taxpayer assistance programs that you've offered over the past year that we've heard about. Could you dive into that a little?
Sure. So nobody should pay more taxes than they're legally required to pay. I mean, that's an important to remember. I mean, everybody should pay the taxes they should pay, but you shouldn't pay more than you're required to pay. So last year, our office actually returned over $4 million in excess tax payments. And one of the things that we really like to try to do at our office is to highlight the tax assistance programs that do exist to help those that are in need or having financial difficulty. So in our state, if you're a senior or disabled and meet certain income thresholds, you can be exempted either partially or totally from your tax requirement. And I think that's a good program. I think all of us think that's a good program. You think about those seniors that are on fixed incomes or having trouble making those payments, or maybe they don't have a lot of income coming in and their house price is appreciated and they're having challenges. So we very much promote those programs. And so that program is actually run through the assessor who determines that tax bill, but we work very closely with the assessor and promote that program. You know, one of the things I've tried to do this year upon being new to the Treasurer's office is really to make sure that people feel that it's their government working for them. So we've held 2 taxpayer town halls in the past year around each tax season, and we're going to do that again next year. And then we also found that a lot of times the county courthouse is not the most convenient place for people to go, either because of the location or because of the hours that it's open. So we went out and figured how can we make it better for the public, and so we talked to Spokane Valley City Council and their government and come to an agreement with them that we were actually able to have a remote treasurer's office in Spokane Valley during the last tax season, and that's something that we'd like to keep going. So if there are viewers that have questions about whether they're eligible for that tax program, I'd encourage them either to come to our taxpayer town halls or just be in contact with our office.
Yeah, I think that was a fantastic partnership you had with the Spokane Valley. I know talking to some of your staffers, you had a good flow of folks that liked the convenience. You know, when they lived in that part of the county, not having to come down, pay for parking, come into the courthouse, you know, to turn in their tax bill there. So I think that was very innovative idea and very customer focused. So
yeah, you know,
hats off to you on that one for sure.
You know, the one thing about our philosophy down at the office is, you know, for us and for efficiency, you know, the easiest way for people to pay their taxes would be to set up direct deposit and that it's going electronic to electronic. But, you know, that's not the right solution for everybody. Mm-hmm. We have some people that really want to come down and pay in person because they want to get that receipt. It's interestingly, we have a large portion of our immigrant community that likes to pay in person, and perhaps that's because they've come from backgrounds where they have a little less trust in government and things, so they want to come down in person and deal with those. One of the challenges, there were some logistical challenges to that because just the amount of cash that we handle, it can be challenging, and so we had to work with the other bankers that we work with and others to try to figure out solutions to that. But yeah, I think that we have some other ideas for coming this year to continue to do outreach. We'd like to do some things on financial literacy. I think it's so important for young people to understand the basics of finance. You know, the problem with you see this all the time with college students. You know, the problem with an 18-year-old is they don't know the difference between being $600 in debt or $60,000 in debt, because by and large, none of them had a job and have to pay that back yet. And so a lot of us in the community want to try to instill those ideas about what an interest rate is and how much things cost and why you have to be careful with a credit card at a young age. That's some of the things that we're going to get to in the future for next year as well, too.
Well, and that's one of those things that isn't just going to make a difference today. I mean, that's something that, I mean, the ripple effect throughout a community to be more, you know, more financially literate. I mean, that is going to see benefits years and decades down the road. So thank you for that. I mean, that's wonderful. You mentioned the town halls. What are some of the common questions you get there? I mean, when a citizen comes to hear their treasurer speak to them, what are some of the questions or kind of concerns that they shared with you?
Well, I was really curious about that because, in my 8 years in the state Senate, I always liked having town halls and like that conversation, and it's just, I find them fun. So we tried to have a lot of town halls, and because I appreciate that interaction. Sometimes I think town halls, when things are real highly partisan, get to be almost like a football game, and one side's attacking the other. But I've always found the town halls that I've participated in be very, conversation based. People want to understand when they come how their tax process works. A lot of seniors come to find out whether they're eligible for that exemption, and then people want to find out how their investment process works as well too. And sometimes people are just kind of curious to see how it works. Or a lot of times we have parents will come with young people because they maybe want to get that young person interested in government. So when I was in the state Senate, I did something called Shadow Your Senator, where we would take young people and they would hang out with me for a day in the Senate and kind of learn that process. And certainly if there's any viewers out there that have a young person that wants to understand more about the Treasurer's office, then we would have them come down and do that. We're not quite ready to launch it yet, but I recently had a constituent tell me about a product that the NFL and Visa have supported, and that is a online video game for football, but it actually works on the principle of financial literacy. So to actually advance the ball down the field, you have to answer questions about finance. And so we're going to see if we can get that project together for some of the local schools as well this year. And because I think that will be a fun one and help instill some good skills as well.
That sounds great. That's incredible.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about some of the entities, the school districts you referenced that bank with the Treasurer's office. What are some of the other entities that use the Treasurer's office for their banking? And when we use the term banking, I mean, can you go into exactly what that means? I mean, is it that these people are getting a checkbook or a credit card from the Treasurer's office? But I mean, it's a great deal of entities that use your services. Could you kind of give us a little more detail on that?
Sure. So when under state law, so everything we do is set by law in Olympia, but in this state, there's a publicly accountable official that the people vote for or don't vote for that's responsible to safeguard their money. So that's the treasurer. So even though we're the county treasurer, actually county government general fund is only about 3% of what we do in terms of cash volume. By far our largest clients, and that's how we like to refer to them, to think about that relationship of who we're serving, by far our largest clients are the school districts. So school districts make up about 42% of the total cash value of what we do in Spokane. And other big entities would be the airport or Spokane Transit. There's also many fire districts, water districts, those sorts of things. And so when we bank for them, in terms of bank question, we're physically accounting for their cash and then making sure that all the pennies balance, and then we're checked by the auditor on that process as kind of the checks and balances of that system. And then one of the things that we do with our investment funds, we go out and we pool those funds and we go out and invest in those treasury bills and other fixed income assets. But one of the things that we also do is that I am not required to by law, but with my discretion, we do what we call treasurer's local direct investments. So I have about $70 million in capacity available where I will make loans directly to those public entities that bank with us. So in the past, our office has done safety improvements for Freeman School District, school safety improvements, or when Central Valley School District was waiting on some funds from the state to start new capital construction, we floated them a bridge loan. And another good example would be the County Roads Department came to me a couple months ago and said that they had $4 million coming in 6 months from the federal government, and if I would float them a loan they could get that project started, project on Bigelow Gulch expansion. that they could get that project started 6 months sooner. And so that's a project where we would charge them less than they would get on the open market with no fees. And we would charge those public entities slightly above what we would get from a treasury bill. So our fund is making a little bit more money and they're saving money. And then the public is benefiting from those projects getting started quicker. And so that's kind of the banking activities that we do.
Okay. You referenced earlier the $1.3 billion of investment funds. Can you give us a little more I mean, that's a great deal of money. Could you kind of dive deep into that a little more? Kind of just where exactly that money is being invested, and kind of what returns the taxpayers in Spokane County are seeing.
Sure. So if you ever want to see a proxy for the growth and the size of government, you could actually look at that investment fund. So it's grown considerably over the last decade because, which reflects both the growth of the overall state economy, but just how much more public dollars are going through the government. So that's really the size of that fund. And so that fund, a lot of money comes in tax season in the spring, and then a lot of money goes out in June when schools go to bond, and then a lot of money comes back in October when there's another tax season, then goes out at the end of the year. So on a cash flow basis, that money's kind of going up and down, and we can go out and match that cash flow needs to fixed income investments in the open market. So kind of like with your personal bank account, instead of just leaving everything in your checking or savings account where you don't get much interest, you go out and invest it and get a higher yielding asset. So the core of our fund of what we invest in are U.S. Treasuries and U.S. government guaranteed assets like farm credit or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And so I really like to invest in farm credit through the Northwest Farm Credit Services because a lot of our local farmers, I'm buying bonds at the national level, but eventually that money is being used for loans to support farmers here locally. So we buy a lot of those funds. Previously, our fund had a lot of small investments in municipals, so would go out and buy county bonds. So like when the county sells the bonds, people like me go out and buy those bonds. A lot of those were in small chunks. We're trying to buy larger chunks of funds so we don't get so paid relatively more in fees when we buy those. And then this year, we've taken some steps to further diversify our fund, both to get a little bit higher yield, but also to diversify against risk. So this year, we've started taking a portion of our funds and buying corporate securities. So companies that we've bought debt from include Microsoft Corporation, Apple Corporation, and others. And then we also have done a few things internationally. So we can buy bonds from international entities that have U.S. backing. So things like the World Bank and others. And so again, every dollar that we earn, we earn from those funds is a dollar less than people will pay in taxes. But we do, because we're managing the public's money, have to take a very conservative approach. So we go safety, liquidity, and then return in that order. And as I always say, and others say as well, when you're investing the public money, return on capital, a return of capital is much more important than return on capital. So those are a few things that we do with the fund. And if people have more interest in that, we'd certainly be willing to talk them down at the office.
All right. What are some of the current projects or initiatives that the Treasurer's Office is undertaking?
Well, some of those one I had spoke about with the public outreach and with this potential financial literacy. We're in the process just today of trying to put together, or the past couple of days, of kind of an annual report. I do think it's really important for public officials to try to make much effort as they can to explain what they're doing, with the public. I also kind of just found personally it really helps me. When I was at the embassy in Baghdad, I was tasked with writing a couple strategic papers. One, this was back in 2007 and 2008. One was on what would happen to Iraq if we pulled out, and then the other one was the Mission Strategic Plan, which was one of the big strategy documents for the embassy. And I remember Ambassador Crocker, who's also from Spokane, that I was able to work with there. I remember him telling me that the real benefit of a strategic study isn't the product that goes at the end, it's the process that you go through to get there. And so we're kind of doing this strategic review, and it really is helping crystallize, what are the important metrics that we measure in the office and what are the important things that we're going to do. So that's a process we're doing right now. And kind of correspondingly, one of the reasons I like doing all those town halls is I had the benefit or privilege to, when I was at Harvard, to be a teaching fellow at economics. So I taught 2 classes of economics when I was at Harvard undergrad. And I remember that my professor at the time, whose class I was helping with, said that to master knowledge, it was see one, do one, teach one was his modality, and it was really in that final piece that the teaching one that was in imparting knowledge, you would actually master the knowledge yourself. So one of the real benefits of us trying to reach out to the public and explain what we're doing is it helps force me to learn it and force our staff to learn it as well too.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned how county government is sort of the implementation arm of state government. Are there any bills or any pieces of legislation that you have your eye on, or concepts that you would like the state legislature to pass that could improve the functions that the treasurer's office offers?
Yeah, thanks. When I was in the Senate, I actually sponsored a bill that does help people deal with their treasurers. So the previous treasurer, Rob Chase, to his credit, wanted a bill where people could make partial payments, and I sponsored that bill in the legislature. And that's great because when people get behind on their tax payments, previously, they had to pay the full amount, which could be really onerous for people, so they'd fall further and further behind. And so now, even though it's a little bit more work for us down at the office, by accepting partial payments, we can help people get back on their feet and help with them. And we've also reached out to other groups like SNAP and other people that deal with the community to try to team up and provide some of that information. This year, one of the bills we're trying to work on, myself and Representative Voles, so Representative Voles will be sponsoring this bill, is we believe that the penalty and interest that government charges when people get behind on their taxes is much too high. So in state law, it is forbidden for people or a private entity to charge over 11% in penalty and interest per year. Anything above 11% per year would be usury. There's an exemption in that state law, and that exemption is for government. So government can charge up to 23% in penalty and interest. And we think that's really too high, because what we find down at the office is that people that get behind on their taxes usually aren't bad people trying to bilk the system. It's somebody had a brain tumor or a health scare and they're behind on their taxes. Well, that 23% can really start adding up really too soon. So we're trying to have a bill bring it back to 11%, which we still think is enough carrot and stick so that people will pay their taxes on time, but not be so onerous that people get these massive tax bills. So that's one that we're trying to do, is trying to bring people's tax payments down.
Okay. And in our final few moments, is there anything you'd like to leave with our audience today?
Well, just that I very much appreciate Commissioner Kerns doing this interview and bringing us down, and that I would really like to have people, if they have questions, be in contact with the office. Government works best when it listens directly to the people, and certainly, Josh, I know that you're somebody that's very open into the public as well, and if people have questions, want to see how it works, or if they have better ideas on how we're doing it, please come down and be in touch.
Yeah, openness and transparency I think our constituents expect nothing less from us. So thank you very much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'd like to thank my guest, County Treasurer Michael Baumgartner, for joining us here today. As a reminder, a video of today's Spotlight can be accessed on our Spokane County homepage and our Spokane County YouTube channel. You can also listen on the go and download our Spokane County Spotlights as a podcast on SoundCloud and iTunes apps. Just go to one of those apps, search for Spokane County. I'm County Commissioner Josh Kerns, and thank you for joining us today on Spokane County Spotlight.